down to the Baja in Mexico. You're down there in Cabo and you're throwing and you guys are having a good time and they're hyping you up. All of that has reached a point where it needs to start paying dividends. Welcome into the Hot Read Podcast. I'm your host, Easton Freeze, Director of Published Content here at BroadwaySportsMedia.com. We're also brought to you by the 440 Podcast Network. You can follow me on social media at Easton Freeze. I am joined for this Wednesday, July 17th episode of the show, as always, by producer JT, who you can follow on social media at JT_Runke. JT, we have been in the NFL media wilderness for, I feel like, about a month now. We can finally see the light at the end of the tunnel, less than a week or exactly a week away from the recording of today's episode, from the opening of Titans training camp. How are we doing? Are we excited?
I'm super excited. I'm honestly jealous of the teams that got to go back today or report today, because it's like now all the intrigue of those teams. I'm gonna watch it now on my timelines and everywhere for the next week.
I'm big into the Baltimore Ravens and Kansas City Chiefs training camp. I'm huge on that for the next 6 days.
Yeah. I'm huge on the Patrick Mahomes has never apparently bought a TV before or had a TV. Now he does, which is an interesting storyline. Yeah, he said he bought his first ever TV today, or like yesterday, because of the NCAA game. The new NCAA 25.
So was he staring at walls before?
I guess so.
Was he listening to the games on the radio? Old school. Did he have an old school radio set on the mantle that he would? Honey, turn that up. The Packers are about to score. I got to hear this color commentary. Is that what he was doing? What was going on?
I have no idea. That's just that's what the
someone needs to ask him these questions. The reporters on the ground. That's their responsibility, is to get to the bottom of this. I need a feature story tomorrow morning. Yeah, man, my brain now tells me, oh, I wish that was us and we were doing it this week and we were back in it, because and I get it, from the end of June through July 4th and then the first couple weeks of July, everyone's getting their vacation out of the way. Everyone is taking the time to focus on something else. Like, I listen to a ton of podcasts. That's the way, some people, like, they grind music all the time, or they're watching TV all the time, or they're big into movies. For me, I'm always throughout the day, if I'm doing anything that is, I can have something in the background going, it's a podcast, because I like to just listen and consume information. And like 10 months out of the year, it's pretty much all sports, and more specifically, pretty much all football. And then there's that month or two in the summer where I just kind of cleanse the palate. I'll listen to something on politics or philosophy, or like nonfiction, just something else, ghost stories, anything else I can find that I find interesting, true crime. And I've been doing that and enjoying it, but I'm starting to get the itch. I'm like, I need a little athletic football show in my life. I need a little football and other F words in my life. And I know that a lot of these, they're still doing these shows, like all the shows that I listen to, local and national. But in the summer, it's a lot of the same thing over and over. And on this show, we try to keep it fresh, but let's be honest, sometimes it's a little repetitive. And you can finally see the light at the end of the tunnel for content. We're gonna get fresh content. Although past me is warning, don't wish training camp too early, because again, training camp gets old in a hurry, and after a month of training camp, it's like, all right, give us the real games, let's get to the real football. But we'll take training camp for now, absolutely. And with a team like the Titans, where there is so much intrigue, and training camp, a team like the Ravens or the Chiefs, I'd imagine it's a lot of the same. Covering the Chiefs must be weird in general, because it's like nothing. Training camp, certainly nothing matters. Regular season, sort of also nothing really matters. It's like the intrigue actually comes when you get to the postseason, which is a million years from now, it feels. With the Titans, it's like this stuff matters right now, because they are rebuilding, they are shifting, everything is changing. There's all kinds of new personnel, players, coaches, everything is so new. And there's a lot of different angles that are yet to be covered. There are things that have yet to be unearthed. And so that's really exciting. We're going to talk today in a part one preview of training camp, which again begins next Tuesday. JT, one of you or I, or maybe both us, we're not sure yet, we'll be there. I gotta have a baby. I don't know. It's all contingent on where she decides to show up in my life. Somebody will be there, and we'll be doing a show on that Tuesday, covering what happens on day one of training camp. While I'm thinking about it, by the way, folks that are listening, and if you're with us live today, and I'm not focused on my camera, it's deciding to. There we go. If you're with us live today, we appreciate you being here. Wanted to let you know, in case you missed it earlier today, we have known this for a couple of weeks now, but have been unable to share it. The Titans finally announced today that there are going to be a couple of open practice opportunities this August. All of them are, I think, maybe end of July, August, this training camp for not just Titan season ticket holders to watch training camp practices, but for the general public to watch practice. They're going to have one practice at Nissan Stadium. That's going to be a bit like there'll be a lot of tickets to that. And then 2 open public, not just season ticket holders, but just anybody that signs up, practices at St. Thomas Sports Park at the Titans facility. You guys can come in and watch on the SeatGeek sports deck they have up there at the top of the building, or you can on the bleachers they have along the sideline right there with us in the media that are watching along. That's a lot of fun. The past couple of years when they have had limited opportunities for pretty much just season ticket holders to come in and do that, they've had a ton of fun. So I recommend hopping on that if you want to. And if you want to, you may already be late, but if you want to, check now. Go to the Titans social media accounts, see if they still have available tickets, and sign up for that. The stadium one in particular is very fun. I remember doing that 2 years ago, and that one's a fun atmosphere. And it's not like their typical practices in a good way. They kind of ham it up. There's some days we come on this show post practice, and it's like, there's a lot of situational drills and not actually throwing the ball and
throwing balls into lakes.
Right, exactly. At the stadium practice, they do some fun stuff. They play to the crowd. It's a little Harlem Globetrottery out there, and so that one's a fun one to attend. And that one, I'd imagine, probably still has some tickets because it's a big stadium. So check that out. But today's preview episode is going to be focused on the offense, and we're going to kind of take all of the offensive storylines we have anticipated from the past 2-3 months of the year and boil them all down into one conversation. JT, you and I have both independently gone into today's episode thinking about this. I think we'll probably just go kind of draft style back and forth, if that's all right with you, just going through our highest intrigue topics as we head into this training camp and discuss the ramifications of those offensively today. Not offensive topics, but offense focused. We're going to get ourselves canceled today. Offensive things only. And then on Thursday, it's going to be defensive topics. And I think, JT, on Thursday, just a little tease for the folks at home, you and I are going to put together dueling way too early 53-man roster predictions with the sole intent of making fun of ourselves a month from Thursday when the actual list comes out and we get to see how wrong we were, or maybe we're Nostradamus and we were right all along, and then we can say you should never doubt us in the first place. So that's going to be a lot of fun. Before we get into the actual football, a couple of things. First of all, like I said, if you're with us live today, we appreciate you being here. We're not on as many Twitter feeds today because of a thing. We'll get that fixed in the future. But if you're watching on YouTube or on my Twitter account or on the 440 Sports Twitter account or on Facebook, wherever you're finding us right now, we appreciate you being here. If you want to join guys like Kenneth and Jacob, stalwarts of the Hot Read podcast, over in the comment section, all you have to do is go over to Broadway Sports Media's YouTube page. It's Broadway Sports Media on YouTube. Find this live stream there. And in the comment section below that video on YouTube, you can be a part of today's conversation. I want to hear the number one thing you all are most looking forward to, maybe the number one question you're looking forward to have answered in the next month of Titans training camp. So get in there. Let me know. We'll discuss all of those things. The other thing, JT, is I have a diatribe that I will be brief with, I promise. But I needed somewhere to vent. And I have a show that has like my name on it. So where better to be vain and focused on self than on the Hot Read podcast with Easton Freeze. Maybe only me will care about this, but I'm hoping some of you all in the audience will understand where my frustration is coming from. This morning, my wife, very pregnant. I mentioned that only because if anyone has had a pregnant spouse before or been pregnant themselves, you know that things get weird when you're pregnant. Like some things taste different, or like you have a heightened sense of smell. Things are just kind of weird, the way your body changes. And with her, there've been times throughout the last 9 months where she's like, "Do you smell that?" And I'm like, "No." She's like, "I think the trash smells." I was like, "It smells like my house right now. I don't know what you're talking about." She comes to me and she's like, "The water tastes funny." I'm like, "Okay, does it really? Are you sure?" And I go, "And it does. It tastes kind of just a little bit off." And then I look at the water filter in our fridge and it's like, "Oh, it needs replacing." Okay, got to replace the filter. Got to go online, figure out how to buy a new one. And if you've been following the Hot Read podcast since the draft, you know on day 3 of the draft, I had this new refrigerator delivered to our house. It was a whole thing during the live stream with JT and Zach and Stoney, where I had to leave for like an hour and they had to like cut a hole in my house to get the refrigerator in. It was a whole thing. And so it's a new fridge. It's a new filter. Okay, where do I go to get a replacement of these? It's a GE fridge. And I want to mention them by name because screw you, GE, for what you've done to your customers, your crooks, your scoundrels, your thieves. I go online, I go on Amazon, and I look up the model number, and I'm seeing all these, as you do with who needs the brand name filter? You just get the third party one, get a pack of 3 for $45, call it a day. And they've got all of those different options, but they're all one number off on the model number. I was like, is this the same thing? Is it not? And then I look it up. I go to Reddit. I go to my browser, and I look this up. In 2020, GE changed the technology of their refrigerator water filters to include RFID microchips in the filter that disable your fridge from dispensing any water of any kind unless you buy their specific approved proprietary active charcoal blend water filter, which they just so happen to charge $60 a pop for, upcharged by like 4 times what the third market options that were previously available to you were. If you try to put one of those third party ones in there, it'll fit, but it doesn't have a chip. And so your fridge will just refuse to give you water. It's communism. It's the least American thing I've ever heard in my life. I feel like you go and you buy a fridge, which you feel like is a one-time purchase, and then you find out you have accidentally opted into a refrigerator subscription model. It's a scam. It is bad faith, and frankly, I think the government should step in. I think this shouldn't be allowed in our great country. And as I follow this logical train down the tracks, I'm so sorry, Derek, and God saying first time live listener. I'm so sorry. This is what you're having to hear. I think we're like one logical step away from a dishwasher with sensors in it that will only wash approved dishes made by the company who makes the dishwasher, or an AI camera in your toaster that refuses to toast bread that isn't made by the company that makes the toaster. At what point does the madness stop? That's what I'm asking, and I think we've gone a step too far here.
I mean, clearly you've had a lot of time to mull this over today.
Hours of my day.
I think you've really built yourself a nice platform here. Look, I was going to roast you for this, but I guess I understand if it's for and because of your pregnant wife having it like that is fair. But if this was just like
I'll just drink tap water. I'll just drink tap water. That's what I was. We have to have filtered water.
I was like, this is a major skill issue because tap water is readily available, or just go out and buy bottled water. But I guess I understand where you are coming from. Of course, there are needs that need to be met. But maybe hopefully once the child has been delivered.
And that's the thing is I'm not bending the knee to GE and their monopolistic crooks over there. They're the big.
Oh, okay. So you're not giving in. You're just having slightly off water.
Newsflash to the GE geniuses that decided to roll this plan out. There are other ways to get filtered water. You could just go to Target, get you a Brita for $20, and then get replacement cartridges for an eighth of the price that you're asking for your stupid proprietary active charcoal nonsense water filter. So that's what we're going to do. Is it less convenient? Absolutely. To have a refrigerator with a water thing, and then the water thing doesn't work, or in our case right now, spits out bad water. Yeah, that sucks. But you know what? We'll put up with it, because I will not be a party to the madness. I will not be a party to the degradation of our society.
Maybe for a birthday gift, I'll just buy you one.
I don't know. It's not the point. I don't want anyone to give money to these thieves. These scoundrels don't deserve your well-earned American dollar. That's right. Jacob says, I want my daughter is going to learn. She's going to learn the delicious taste of a little hose water on a hot summer afternoon, that the way the Lord intended it. We were all raised on a little backyard hose water, and we turned out mostly fine. So she'll be mostly fine. Okay. Titans football now, a hard pivot to NFL Titans offensive narratives here in the next month or so of training camp. People in the comments get it. The best water is the backyard hose. There's nothing better. I don't know about you. Like a good slip and slide day. Did you ever have a slip and slide day as a kid? And then and then you get a long chug of, hey, quit hogging the hose. Give me the hose. I'm thirsty. You just start guzzling that thing like a dog. You hold it to your face. That's the best way to stay hydrated, I think, on outside hose water. Exactly. Yeah, you know what? Babies are born without immune systems, I'm told. She's going to get one in a hurry. She's going to be drinking city water from the hose from the backyard. Okay. All right. Hard pivot here to the Titans. JT, do you want to defer to me, or would you like to go first? What is the number one thing that we want to talk about in terms of storylines / questions we want answered this August?
I'll start us off here with just kind of an overarching theme of what the beginning of training camp and next week will be. And I think that is that we are going to get gut reactions next week to finally having pads on. We've been talking, we literally for the last 3 months have said, let's see them with pads on. And now we're going to see if our previous biases were correct or not, because the pads have now come on, ladies and gentlemen. The pads.
Well, let me offer one correction, by the way, because it's a new regime with the Titans, and I know there are league-wide rules about when you can and can't wear pads, and it's up to the discretion of the coaches when they choose to use the days they have to. So let's maybe not. There's a chance next week they're just not in them, and it's very frustrating. Well, when they eventually are, next week, the next week, it's coming soon. And when they are,
in that the pads coming on, it's the training camp is finally here. Like it's go time, and I think that's where we can finally see if we were correct or not in some of our evaluations of what they did during OTAs. And I think that as we start getting into these more in-depth and more higher energy practices, as we gear up for the season, like Brian Callahan said, it's something that he certainly has probably been sitting on since probably 4th of July or around there, right? Like he's ready to go. He's roaring ready to go. And I think most of us are, and it's going to be interesting to see if the guys that we were high on, some rookies, some UDFAs, some guys who have shown flashes. Let's see if they can continue to string together what they did during OTAs, or when it really comes down to it, they just fall and crash under pressure here. So with that in mind, the first and I think major storyline for this training camp as we head towards next week has to go with Will Levis, right?
Yep, that's where I was starting as well. Yeah, we're on the same page.
Biggest question and storyline for Will Levis next week will be, how has Will Levis from OTAs progressed to now? And it's pretty simple to see that they, and as I say they, I mean Brian Callahan, Will Levis himself, the offensive coordinator, Nick Holtz, Bo Hardigree, all these people have been saying that during OTAs, Will Levis was really focused on working on his mechanics and refining some things. And that will continue post OTAs. And then when we get to training camp, it really is going to be the time where you see Will Levis finally kind of fit into that mold and settle in to being this team's number one quarterback. Well, I'm interested to see what has changed since then. Like, are we going to continue to see a Will Levis have some miscues in the early part of training camp? Or is he going to come in and really look like he is the guy and he's worked on everything that he needs to and is going to be able to run this offense in an efficient manner? And as Chef Rand says in the comments, hopefully no more lake balls, unless the only lake balls I want to see is like the last one we saw in the lake where Will Levis throws
intentionally thrown in the lake.
Well, not even thrown, but punted into the lake.
Excuse me,
in a celebration. That's the only footballs I want to see going in the lake from here on out. And I really do hope we see that version of Will Levis. And I think if not, if we continue to see the same struggles and up and down days, and of course you're going to have bad days, but the inconsistencies to not string a couple good days together for Will Levis this early on into training camp, I think is going to be a major storyline and kind of where we see this team go from there throughout the rest of training camp.
I'm glad this is where you started, because it's where I think it's the obvious place to start, and not shocking that you start an offensive conversation around the quarterback, but it's a storyline that we touched on in May, in June, at the beginning of June, when we were getting through to the end of OTAs, and we spent a couple of episodes on it, but I think it's kind of been forgotten or brushed aside, at least as not all that concerning by fans, because of a lot of the fair reasons for folks' optimism, excitement to see Will Levis in a new system with more help around, all of these things, all of these reasons around Will Levis that we have seen change in the last 6 calendar months that lead us to believe, okay, he's going to be in a much better situation. And having seen the flashes we saw from him in the fall last year, pair that with the help he now has, it should be better. And I'm excited to see what that looks like. Yes. But it's easy to lose sight of, okay, what is the actual, like the dude, the actual guy, Will Levis? What is he working on? How is he improving? How is he going to take advantage of that improved situation? And at the end of OTAs, 2 months ago, you and I sat here on the show talking about how, was it a bad OTAs for Will Levis? No, it was not bad. But was it a market improvement from what we saw from him in December, and just when I'm there during the week at a standard weekly practice. What we saw from him in the games he was playing last year before he got injured, banged up there at the end. Like, was there a significant change from the end of 2023 season to the beginning of the offseason for the Titans in 2024? And the answer was not really. And we wrote a lot of that off, I think, again, fairly so, not excuses so much as they were reasons. Hey, this guy's learning a new system. He's learning a lot of new guys around him, both the guys that are playing with him and the guys that are in his ear. He is changing some of the ways that he fundamentally approaches his game, approaches the quarterback position. He's working on different arm angles. He's working on improved footwork and different platforms, and changing some things from a biometric standpoint, that biomechanical standpoint rather, that he is trying to improve his game on the whole. And that's a learning curve, as is the case when you change anything in any game. I remember comparing it to like trying to learn how to hit a different ball flight with a golf club. Like, you're going to hit the ball really poorly for a while before you figure it out. It's time for him to be able to hit that perfect cut. Like, you had the whole summer. You've been training the whole time. We've seen the videos of you and the boys, your trip down to the Baja in Mexico. You're down there in Cabo and you're throwing, and you guys are having a good time and they're hyping you up. All of that has reached a point where it needs to start paying dividends. And I'm not saying that it's not going to, but like you alluded to here at the beginning of the conversation, it's going to be a lot of, overreaction Monday type gut reactions of whatever that first practice, whatever that first that first week of pair of practices, whatever we're going to. That is going to be it's going to be the launching point for the rest of the training camps conversation. And it's going to be the loudest portion, I'd imagine, in terms of a reflection on him. Now, I'm of the mind that I think it's going to look different. I think it's going to feel different. Assuming that they don't start really, really slow and like don't throw the ball much, which is kind of worst case scenario for us. Cause then it's like, I don't know. They know they've had one throwing session. It lasts 7 minutes. I don't really, assuming they actually start to do the thing. I think that you are going to see that difference, because it's going to, start to click, and he's going to change that mode from in the lab experimenting in the spring to refining the things that you want to refine and like starting to dial it in, make it game ready. So I'm not pessimistic there, but I am with you that that's the number one most important thing we're going to be looking for. And it's going to be the number one most loudly trumpeted thing, whether it's good or bad, from those of us in the media based on those first couple of practices.
Yeah, I think that would be really funny, right? It almost would be like if they didn't have a lot of the throwing sessions at the beginning, and we're just like forced to watch like Tyjae Spears and Tony Pollard just get the same amount of same amount of touches and just some work like that. I might myself throw a ball into the lake then.
They want a situational drills where they do the thing where they run the whole play, but then the quarterback, they just mark the throw. They don't actually throw it. And you do that for 2 hours. It's in the cards. It could happen.
It's like getting socks for Christmas, right? Like that could be next.
Thanks,
that could be
Grandma. Just
right?
don't worry about gifts in the future. I don't need any more of these. Okay, I'll go with my next one. And this one's, it's maybe not, it is not the next most important thing, but it's the next thing I wrote down. It's the next thing that came to mind for me. And maybe it's because of how much we talked about it in the spring. You mentioned it at the top here, putting pads on. I want to see one Mr. Jaquan Jackson in pads. We talked about it all spring. Jaquan Jackson, Titans 6th round, rookie wide receiver, burner, slot only guy, small but speedy. We didn't have a lot of expectations for him coming into his NFL career in general. We weren't crazy about the pick at the time. And he came in to OTAs and he looked the part pretty immediately. He fit in pretty immediately. He was making plays on a daily basis. When we were there, 1 or 2 plays, we were like, Jaquan, okay, I gotta write that down. Jaquan Jackson, nice high point catch against Chidobe Awuzie in 7-on-7s today. Like, it was that every day. And was it like what you'd expect to see from a first round wide receiver? No, but it was more than you expected to see from a guy that wasn't really on anybody's radar coming into the draft, and then was a 6th round pick, kind of a flyer guy. I know he's kind of he's best friends with Tyjae Spears. There's a Tulane connection. How much of that impacted the decision to draft him? And then that's kind of overshadowed by, look at the other guys that were on the board available when he was drafted. And that, we're talking about different receivers that we were hired on in the draft process. All of those things kind of went by the wayside, because it's like, this guy looks like he can play ball. And yet he is a smaller player. He is a speed reliant player. And we said all along, this is great. This is awesome. Fantastic start. Let's see it in pads before we really get too excited about him just making the roster for beginners, if not, actually impacting the Titans season. Once he puts pads on, it would not shock, and I'm not saying this is what I'm expecting, but it would not shock me at all if it became mundane pretty quick. If it became apparent, like there's the sixth rounder. There's the undersized guy that's going to have an uphill climb to make it in the NFL that at the very least is going to take some time to acclimate and figure out his role in this league. That could happen. But there's a part of me that's kind of like, I would love to be wrong about this. I'd love to have been wrong about this guy back in April when we were panning the decision to draft him. I'd love for him to continue to impress us through this offseason process and prove us wrong. And again, I think the ceiling for him this year, even if it continues to be awesome, is, wide receiver 5, a regular contributor on special teams, maybe a returner in some capacity, not maybe, definitely a returner, but like a plus returner in that capacity. That would still be really good, and I think would be an overwhelming success for a 6th round pick that, again, was panned largely when the decision was made.
Yeah, I think he's going to have to continue to prove himself. It's one thing to climb the ladder and go get a high point ball when you have no pads on, but let's see it when you have a guy like L'Jarius Sneed or Roger McCreary in the slot going one-on-one against you and playing
jamming you off the line of scrimmage.
Exactly.
How are you grill? How are you
going to respond to that? I think is the biggest thing. Derek asks on that question. He asks if he's bigger than Worthy. I think he's shorter than Worthy, but
I'm gonna look at I mean, they're similar.
They're similar, but in terms of weight, it's hard to be smaller than Xavier Worthy, who's like around 170 pounds. It's
so
like
Worthy is 5'11", 165. Yeah, 170.
165.
He's gonna play in the 160.
Man, I remember 170. Man,
and
that's
crazy. That was was the fat boy fake water weight combine.
Correct.
March weight. That's the Bryce Young 204 weight that nobody actually believes. Jaquan Jackson's height and weight, he comes in at 5'11", 185. So he's the same height and he's got 20 pounds.
There you go. Yeah.
So he's he's not as small as a Xavier Worthy, but he is a small player in comparison to the rest of the guys. I'm not going to say that he's not quite like Kyle Phillips thin. But he's close. He's in that same range. So,
and Chef Rand says Jaquan will be good depth this year, and Jacob says Jackson is the Kirkland brand of water filter. Xavier Worthy is the overpriced GE version.
And you know what? Give me the 3-pack of the brand that I can't pronounce. I take that all day long. I trust that.
But I think you do bring up a good point to kind of springboard off of Jaquan Jackson. Jaquan Jackson, like we were just talking about, he's going to have to continue to prove himself versatile if things don't go his way and he still doesn't look like the player he did at OTAs, because we start to see the limitations of those physical abilities that we were so worried about when the Titans first drafted him. So you're going to have to prove yourself in other areas. And I think one area where he's going to really start to shine, and where another really interesting part of this offensive skill position group is what's going to happen on the kicking and punting returns this upcoming season. I think that's where Jaquan Jackson, if he kind of, falls a little bit on the wayside as a receiver, and the guy that we saw during OTAs doesn't exactly come back to form there, I think he's still going to be able to prove and provide a lot on the on special teams for sure. And I think that brings up my next one, which is a good segue, which is just more of a discussion about the entire wide receiver room. And one of the storylines being that there's only so many spots and so many kind of role-playing wide receivers on this Titans team from the past year or so. And with the additions of Calvin Ridley, Jaquan Jackson, and Tyler Boyd, it means some guys are going to be left by the wayside and most likely not end up with this team. We kind of talked about this during OTAs, how the Cincinnati Bengals, they had a lot of different guys who could play roles, but never were a team that really kept a deep group of receivers, only keeping 6 over the past 2 years going into the season. And so when you look at a list here of the Titans wide receivers, we talked about basically the first 5 or 6 are pretty set in stone with DeAndre Hopkins, Calvin Ridley, Tyler Boyd, Nick Westbrook-Akine, Treylon Burks, you would assume makes the roster. Like, I think that's pretty far and away going to happen. And then you would assume that Jaquan Jackson makes the roster as well. So that's already 6 right there, which means guys who have made this team before, like Kyle Phillips and last year's 7th round pick, Colton Dowell, are guys who are on the outside looking in. Kearis Jackson as well. And so the storyline is going to be, how can these guys prove and show that they are worth a 7th wide receiver spot? I think they're going to have to make cases for themselves to be on this team, because when you think about guys that you have on this team, like a Tyler Boyd, who has been super reliable, you think about the injury concerns that possibly could come up with DeAndre Hopkins or Calvin Ridley. Both have missed some time in the past. DeAndre Hopkins more specifically, but these are guys that, you don't just keep because you need the depth. These guys are going to have to go out there like a Kyle Phillips. Kyle Phillips is going to have to prove to this team that he can be a reliable asset as the 2nd or 3rd slot receiver, and then also maybe try to bring something on special teams, which he really has not been able to. Colton Dowell, he's still struggling with injury. Does he find his way back to the field at all for this team? And then Kearis Jackson coming back from injury here. Can he provide and maybe be a sleeper pick to be a special teamer for this team? And I think that's going to be really interesting as we get deeper into training camp.
Yeah, you mentioned the historical relevance of how many receivers the Bengals have kept in the past, and I think that's a decent measuring stick. It's going to be 6, 7 at most is really what I think it's going to come out as, and it's less about how many total they keep and more about how many spots are even open for discussion in the next month. Therefore, there's no world in which they don't keep these guys, and that is the starting 3 plus Treylon Burks. I don't see a way that any of those guys miss making the roster. And then there are 2 guys that I think are not locks. I wouldn't call them locks today, but I would be very surprised if they didn't make the roster, and that would be Jaquan Jackson, purely because of that role. If he was just a receiver and didn't present any return upside, I would say uphill battle. But because they have him penciled in, maybe in pen written in to be one of their returners, I think that he's going to make the team, because as you heard Brian Callahan at one point during the OTAs sessions talk about, when you're a fringe guy, when you're not a starter, you need to be able to present an upside as a special teamer in some capacity. That's the way that you make yourself of use, of importance to a team. That is going to matter. And so for a guy like Jaquan Jackson, that's going to be his ticket in. And then NWI, Kenneth asks, why can't I get NWI off my team?
Say the line.
Say the line. Yeah, exactly. Everybody, the whole class is going to laugh at you, Bart Simpson. It's just give it up is what I would say to that. You should have stopped trying. It should have been evident to you years ago, frankly, that there was no killing Nick Westbrook-Akine. There was simply enduring the season-long NWI experience, which is better than people give it credit for. I would say the only guys really fighting those last 2 in, assuming it's 6, or fighting to justify giving a 7th spot to a receiver, is Kearis Jackson and Kyle Phillips. I would include Colton Dowell in that conversation if he were not hurt. Everything I'm still hearing indicates it's going to be a while for him. It's a significant injury. He will be on, still on the PUP or whatever the list is that they decide to put him on to come into the season. He'll still be around, but he's not going to be ready, I don't think, to be a part of this team. And so it's going to be I guess that makes it an 8-man race for 6 spots, maybe 7 spots if they really show out. And so, yeah, I think that's an interesting conversation. I'll shift to the tight end position. We had somebody in the comments a couple of minutes ago bring this up. I think it was Derek. He said, yeah, I'm quite curious about the tight end situation with Chig and Wiley. This one is an obvious one, but I'll just go ahead and put it back out there because we haven't talked about it in a while. Hey, these 2 guys are going to be significant players this August and significant players for this team. They're both going to make the roster. They're both going to have an impact on the game day functions of the Tennessee Titans. But what are those roles going to look like? How are they going to differentiate themselves? And more importantly, who's going to emerge as the primary tight end for this team? Going into last season, we weren't crazy about the pick of Josh Whyle, not because we didn't like him as a player in the draft, but because we didn't think he was a fit for this Titans team at the time. And we were proven wrong on that front. He was a good player, and they fit him into the ways that they used him. I think he's going to be an even greater fit for this Brian Callahan system, in the way that he and his former Cincinnati Bengals coworkers on that coaching staff utilized tight ends. You talk about watching that team a lot the past couple of years, JT, and seeing Josh Whyle types thrive in the tight end role in that system. That seam route runner who is a big body, massive red zone target. Just got to throw it roughly in the area. He can high point the ball. He's more athletic than you give him credit for. He's also a big enough body to be an inline blocker and provide a plus in that department. He is a nice, he's kind of like when you think about the tight end that you need, but he's super unsexy, no aura. It's just like he's just a solid lunch pail, blue collar type of guy. That's a Josh Whyle to me, and that's not a slight. I love, you got to have those guys. It's the Jimmys and Joes, not the X's and O's. It's a you got to have 22 fellas. It's not about who your best player is, and having a Josh Whyle on your team is a good thing. And I think that he can be at his best, 400 or 500 yard guy, 6 or 7 touchdowns on the season, and be a big red zone impact player. But it's going to take bites off the plate of Chigakonkwo. It's going to take food off of his plate at the dinner table. And I just don't know how they're going to utilize them. It's going to be different. Chig's going to be that, get the athlete in space, let him be the yak guy, let him be the guy that you throw the ball to in the flat with a couple of blockers in his way, gets ahead of steam, and then just watch him, like we talked about all last season. It felt like every time Chigakonkwo got the ball in his hands, he thought it was the last time he was ever going to run the football, because he ran like his life depended on it. And so, that's a good thing to have on your football team too. I just don't know how much they're going to use that kind of guy in this new system.
Yeah, and I think I'll push back a little bit on and give Josh Whyle some flowers. You talk about a guy who doesn't have aura. I'd say that was the Josh Whyle of last year. I'd say Josh Whyle has a little bit of aura now too, and then he comes with all of those skills, but he also has that aura to him as well. So maybe the auraless guy here in the tight end room is, as Jacob points out in the comments here, Nick Vannett. I guess maybe.
However, we don't have to point that out. Yeah, no.
Derek asked an interesting question, and I think he says, think they'll use Chig similar to Debo, and that's an interesting question in theory. I think that's what Chig's his skill set probably lends him to. I think we talked about this last week on our taco episode, that if you had to ask me who ends up being the tight end one on this team, my answer would be there is none, because I don't think that either one will be the clear-cut tight end one this season.
Well, so that begs this question for you, JT. Do they need one? Is that
I don't think
thing?
so.
Is that a bad thing?
And that's I don't think that's a bad thing whatsoever, because you talk about the Brian Callahan led offenses of years past with the Cincinnati Bengals. The guys that come to mind that fit that Josh Whyle kind of sample size is tight end who has the same name, Drew Sample. You look at a guy like CJ Uzoma. You look at the guy like Hayden Hurst. These guys who, they're not really the athletic specimens who are route running technicians, but you get them in that red zone spot. You get them close to the goal line. They're going to be more productive than say a Chigakonkwo was in this new offense. And so where does that leave Chig? I think that gives him the rest of the field for Brian Callahan to deploy some interesting looks and some interesting packages, like they've alluded to, getting Treylon Burks a couple of those looks every single game, where you have two really athletic guys who can, when they get the ball in their hand, they can have as good of a chance as anybody to take it to the house. You're going to get those Chigakonkwo looks where you're getting those design plays to him. Not to mention, as we talked on last week's episode, that Chigakonkwo may, outside of the red zone, serve as that primary pass blocker, because he's sneaky, was pretty good at it last season. And I think that's a role that he has continued to develop for himself, and is something that I think goes under discussed.
Hey, if you are listening with us live right now, just want to let you know we appreciate you being here, and the conversation is going to continue. But Everybody stop what you're doing. If you're just passively listening, pick up your phone, pick up the remote, go and make sure you're subscribed to Broadway Sports Media's YouTube page. We did a lot of work with the YouTube over the summer. We're going to be doing a ton of new stuff this fall. It's going to be very exciting. You're going to want to make sure you're subscribed there, notifications on if that's your kind of thing, and make sure you're liking the video for us. If you can just go ahead right now, take a minute. We're going to take a minute on the show, a little moment of silence for you to go hit the like button. That thumbs up right there. Thank you for hitting that. JT, do you have, I know it's your turn. Do you have written down anything about the running backs on your list?
The only thing I was really going to say is which running back makes the case for RB3, and the same thing that we've talked about. And like, it's not really that big of a discussion.
Because I have a segue, because I have a thought about your tight end take just there. Sure. That I want to kind of merge with the running back situation, and then I will let you get back in line. But I think you'll find this interesting because, I asked you that question. Does it matter? Does it matter whether or not they have a clear-cut tight end one, a premier guy? And you could ask the same about the running back position, because the thing I have written down is, hey, we talked, this was a beaten to death topic during the spring. Who's the running back one? What exactly are these? Like, these two guys, both good, both like, kind of they both feel like 1B type of guys, but somebody's got to be the 1A, right? Or are they really going to be an even split tandem? Are they going to be used any differently from one another? A lot of questions on that front. And every time we'd ask anybody in charge that question, they'd say, hey, good question. Yes. Next question. And be like, well, you didn't answer that was the point. You didn't want to answer. Got it. When these guys have pads on, when they're actually running the plays during the times in mid-August when they're running actual install for the season, and PR has their eyes on us in the media like hawks, phones down, can't take notes about this, can't report certain things about formation, and this is government info, this is government secret stuff, this is Area 51, keep it locked down. What are we going to see? What's going to be in there behind that vault? And the reason I bring that up now on the heels of the tight end conversation is because we may come to the conclusion in 2 weeks, 3 weeks, that it doesn't matter. And as Kenneth says in the comments, running back one does not matter. Or he says, he says, does matter. One of them is clearly outperforming the other. Then splitting snaps equally is not a good idea. Sure. Yes. No, I get that, Kenneth. If one is outperforming the other, it's going to be clear. Okay. Hey, Tajay has to be the one. You better give him more snaps. You shouldn't fall into the trap of, well, we paid Tony Pollard more money to come here, so we better give the ball to your best players, coaches. That's not rocket science. But if they are similar in terms of production, in terms of play style, and they are used interchangeably, we've kind of floated the theory, okay, maybe Tajay is used more in the passing game, Tony is used more in the traditional pure running game. That wouldn't surprise me. Whatever the case may be, does it matter whether or not one of them emerges? And I would also say no. I'd say no to the tight end question. I'd say no to the running back question. But there's a big part of me that says, I don't know if that's good. And the reason why is because on any good team, you have to have a couple of dudes, right? It can't just be a bunch of marginally above average players that are, good role players. Like, role players are necessary, but stars are a requirement in order to really accomplish anything in the season. And you think back to the best teams in recent memory. Let's go the Brian Callahan example with the Bengals. Their best teams of the past couple of years, they had a lot of really solid role players on offense and especially on defense. It's like, the Lou Anarumo show, that defensive coordination of all these guys that aren't necessarily stars, but boy, do they work together as a unit. Yes. On offense in particular, you've got to have stars, man. And that's where Jamar Chase comes into play. That's where Joe Burrow comes into play. That's where T. Higgins comes into play. These guys take over a game, right? The Chiefs, it's obvious. Patrick Mahomes, that's really all you need sometimes. Take over a game. Travis Kelce, he's washed. Get to the playoffs. Oh, there it is. There's playoff Trav. Takes over a game. Rob Gronkowski, talk about a washed guy in the freaking Super Bowl with the Buccaneers a couple of years ago. And you get, Super Bowl touchdown at the age of 74. Rob Gronkowski, Tom Brady to Rob Gronkowski. It's like, okay, these guys can take over a game. They are stars. The Titans have to have that guy, like a couple of those guys, ideally. And so if that just comes from the receivers, if it's a bunch of dudes that, you don't need a tight end one, you don't need a running back one, you just need DeAndre Hopkins and Calvin Ridley. Those two guys are they're your bread and butter. They're your salt and pepper. They are going to take over the game when you need them to take over a game. Great. But if they aren't, or if either of them misses a significant amount of time, or if either of them kind of hits that 30-year-old cliff eventually and things start to go downhill, I'm not saying that's going to be the case, but it's always on the table. What then? Who's the guy that's going to be the one to take over? And in that case, I think we're going to be calling on, hey, Tajay Spears, young player, a lot of talent. It's time to step up. Like they need more out of you. Hey, Chikakonkwo or Josh Wiley, young players, a lot of talent, cheap. It's your time. This is the time for, if you're going to be a star, to show us that you can be a star. Let's see it. And so that's why I'm hesitant, rather, to say for sure they don't need a guy to emerge at tight end. For sure they don't need a guy to emerge at running back. I think they don't, but a big part of that is because I think they have those dudes at the wide receiver position.
Yeah, I would agree with you, and I think another interesting part of the conversation is Derek asked if think they will run a lot of split back. I think there's definitely a possibility. You talk about
You've been on that train, yeah.
Those definitely those role player types. I think in the Bengals run to the Super Bowl, a guy like Samaje Perine made such dividends for that team, being kind of the change of pace back for Joe Mixon on that offensive run that they were kind of on to that Super Bowl. But I mean, really, you think about the past couple of years, especially just like looking at it last year, a lot of teams have quietly moved towards a running back tandem group. You look at like Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery on the same, kind of getting interchanged on every single drive. You look at Arthur Smith's running back room of Bijan Robinson and who's the other one? His name escapes me for the Falcons.
Player? Or what team? Falcons?
Running back. Yeah, Bijan, and then the other one.
Yeah, I'll look it up. Totally, I'm blanking on it.
He was very underrated last year as well. It's going to come to me. I mean, Najee Harris and Jaylen Warren, these kind of two backfields that, you know, Gus Edwards and Justice Hill and Keaton Mitchell, the three-headed monster last year for the Ravens, that outside of one game where they didn't use their running game at all, were pretty dominant last year behind that offensive line. And so
Tyler Algier.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
So you talk about teams, you know, is it nice to have one of those guys emerge and be like a very, very good star, young star for this team if it is Tyjae, or will it be a really nice, pleasant surprise to see Tony Pollard return to form, where you're getting pretty good value on that deal? I think that is a good thing to have, but I don't think it's necessary because we've seen teams in the past couple of years kind of scheme more towards a running back by committee.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, sorry for skipping you in line, but I felt like that was a good jumping off point for that conversation. What's the next thing you have written down here?
So this is the last thing I have written down here, which is,
I hope it has something to do with the offensive line.
It does.
Okay, good. And so we got to get to that. That's also pretty important.
My last thing here for the offensive side of the ball for this episode is the right side of the O-line race. I didn't want to call
circled, squared, check marked, highlighted, right side O-line. Yeah.
Yeah. I didn't want to call it the right tackle and right guard race, or the right tackle, right guard race, the right side of the whole line.
All you cats over there. All you cats. What's going on? Yeah.
But it kind of is that, right? You're talking about like 5 or 6 guys who could realistically play either the right guard or right tackle position, or you could find so many different combinations of right guard and right tackle that you kind of just have to set them all up on that line and say whoever the first 2 across the line are wins. And I think that
you break that pool cue over the knee, you just toss it and you say, figure it out, boys.
And I think that's exactly that is what Bill Callahan is doing now. He broke the pool, broke the pool cue and says, here we go, fight it out, see what happens. And I think you look at a lot of guys who there's going to be a decent amount of competition. I know friend of the show, Stoney Keeley, really is super high on the dark horse candidate, John Ajuku, being
selfishly high on John Ajuku. I mean, that is the reason why, but I respect that. Yeah.
But I mean, he showed flashes of being a serviceable guy in training camp. The biggest one, I think, is NPF. Do we see him out there? That's his first step to getting his leg up in this race, is just being out there with the team. You talk about these other guys who have been around, Daniel Brunskill, who has been serviceable, but might find a better position as being a right guard or center depth. And then the guys that they brought that, Dylan Radins as well, fitting into that right guard position. I think he might be the front runner for that one. And then see these other guys that really felt like they were Bill Callahan decisions to bring them in, Sadiq Charles being a kind of weird signing during free agency, a guy who Bill Callahan spent time with Washington, and then Leroy Watson trading one of those 7th round picks to go get him. You also have Jalen Duncan, who is still hanging around. Like you have all of these guys, even Latavius Simmons, who they signed. You know, there's a lot of guys here that are all fighting for 2 spots, and so I think that is the most
Ryan Dooley, who's a player that's I'm looking at the roster. He's on the roster. I couldn't tell you the first thing about him.
Jerron Christian as well. I think he's on the left side of the line, but you have those guys who could potentially find spots on the right side.
Hello.
The point to this is that there's a lot of guys who it really doesn't feel outside of like reading the tea leaves that like outside of MPF reading the tea leaves, like they want him to be the guy at right tackle. Outside of that, I think it's anybody's game to prove themselves in training camp here. And so I think that brings up one, the possibility of having a lot of different, combinations. And 2, as Derek points out, how do we feel about the depth at the O-line position? I think we're seeing a team that has a lot more depth and versatility than we have seen in a while.
Well, on paper, yes. There's a lot of names that you're like, okay, this, there may be something there. It's not the Titans of the past couple of years. The depth has been a lot of guys that based on what you've seen or based on their measurements, like what athleticism, whatever, you don't want that guy in the field. We know what the ceiling is. It's not great. Don't do it. Let's avoid that guy getting any snaps. They're now in a situation where they've got guys where you're like, you're not confident by any means. Like, you got to roll Jalen Duncan out there on a Sunday. Like you're circling that matchup for the opposing team. And yet there's a part of you, or at least us, that, we scouted him. I endorsed him as a flyer option pre-draft last year if they were wanting to go and get a guy like that, and they did it. There's some upside there. There's some talent. There's something, they've got it in their body based on what we've seen, whether it's athleticism, but whether it's the traits that they exhibit, whether it is the measurements that they have, the size that they have, whatever. They've got something to them that piques your interest, and you're not sure if we've seen the best of them yet. But again, that's all on paper, Derek, and they don't have a lot of sure things on this roster. So when you've got a guy like Bill Callahan at the reins who inspires the utmost confidence, and you are sure as a fan for good, you have good reason to believe, well, if anybody's going to get, the best out of them, serviceable play out of this guy, Leroy Watson, it's going to be a Bill Callahan job. He's going to be the one pulling the strings, puppeteering that. And so that is good, but we've not seen it yet. And that's a big part of, again, getting back to, let's see these guys get pads on. Last year, around the time of a month from now, 3 weeks from now, it was a weekly ritual for those of us or daily ritual for those of us in the media to go and talk to Arden Key after how many sacks today did you have, Arden? Was it 8, 9, or 10? I like that. And it wasn't good. That was the first kind of cracks in the, Mike Herndon might be right. This offensive line might suck. And that rang very true throughout the season. Let's not see that again. Would I think be ideal. And that, let's see if they can. Today, I'm not sure the quarterback got touched once, even though they're not actually sacking the quarterback. I'm not sure if they were trying to, they could have, because wow, that right side of the line, they're coming together. They figured something out. It's starting to click for them, whatever it may be. In terms of kind of setting we're going to set our 53-man way too early predictions on Thursday, but I'll go ahead and say today that I think, to kind of refresh people's memories, there's a lot of names being thrown out around there. It seems to be, based on best available information, that the right tackle position is Nicholas Petit-Frere's to lose, tentatively. And both the right tackle and right guard, the guys in the pole position aren't like, it's not like NWI where I'm like, well, he's not locked in, but it's his position to lose. No, this is a much flimsier case for these guys than the wide receiver position. So NWI as NPF, different N initials guy. He is the guy in charge of that position, it seems, with guys like Leroy Watson on his heels, like John Njoku on his heels. Those are the guys being considered in that conversation. And then at right guard, I came out of OTAs thinking I'm at the point where I think it's going to be Sadiq Charles. It's his position to lose, but a much stronger competition here. It would not shock me if it's Sadiq Charles. It would not shock me if it's Dylan Radins. It would not shock me if it's Daniel Brunskill. Those are kind of the guys that I think are all in that conversation for that right guard position. Charles, Brunskill, Radens. Just making sure I'm dotting all my T's and crossing all my I's or something like that. Yeah, okay. So that's kind of where I think that position group is at. JT, did you disagree, or do you think the same thing, or what?
I think it's a closer race than people want to say for the right guard. I think Dylan
Yeah.
Radens may each day we might come out in 2 weeks being like Sadiq Charles had the better day. Dylan Radens had the better day. Dylan Radens had the better day. Sadiq Charles had the day. Oh, Daniel Brunskill flashed today. Like there's so many things that could happen, but I think that race is going to be the one that is more closely contested. I do, however, have an interesting, possibility here for the right tackle position. Like let's say the hypothetical scenario that
JC Latham can't play left. Put him back at right. That's what you're going to say, right?
No, I was going to say,
okay. Gotcha.
What if NPF continues to just kind of be, have a nagging injury and just like things continue to not work out for him right now.
That darn FanDuel account strikes again. Right.
They're like if the scenario where we continue to see in frustration with NPF being available or things like that, who is the next man for you to, as you talked about, like it is his position to lose, but who is the guy that would be closing that gap on him? Is it Leroy?
I think what you're saying is that right guard, they got a couple of guys that wouldn't shot like that you think are starter. Like I think Daniel Brunskill is starter capable. I think Dylan Radens is starter capable. I think Sadiq Charles is starter capable. At tackle, it's kind of like it better be NPF because otherwise I don't know.
Exactly. That's what I'm like. If we get to like preseason in the ones are Sadiq Charles and like a Leroy Watson, how does that make you feel about the right side of the line?
I genuinely, like, if you ask me who's your two today, like having not seen them in pads, like just guessing based on it, it's a Joku for me. Like he's the guy that I have the second most confidence in, and that it's not a lot of confidence, but it's the most of everybody not named NPF. So that that I'm going to need to see a lot more to have any actual real confidence in that guy, I guess.
And so, yeah, I mean, I think that's the point I want to drive home. It's like, it better be NPF because a Sadiq Charles, like John Ajuoku, right side of the line does not maybe it turns out great, but to start off the year, it's like that. It's like the three-headed dragon meme where the left side of the line and Peter Skoronski and JC Latham is super fierce, and then you have Lloyd Cushenberry as the center, as the second dragon, who's also fierce, but then is side-eyeing the third dragon, who is just like he's just derpy as all hell because it is literally Sadiq Charles or Dylan Radens and John Ajuoku. Like that could be what the Titans O-line ends up being. But then again, the Bill Callahan factor has not been rarely proven wrong, so it'll be interesting to see.
As Jacob says in the comments, as long as none of the Titans offensive linemen are taking post-game advice from Myles Garrett, then he will be happy. That is a fair place to start. JT, it sounds like you're all out, JT. I'm all out of
that was the end of mine. Yeah.
I had 3 cutting room floor ones that are gross. They're nerdy. I'm just gonna throw them out there. We won't spend long.
Fire away.
I'm just gonna rapid fire some
reaction takes. Okay.
Some really they're things that are like, we're probably going to have these conversations and they'll be on August 23rd because we're just going to be so tired of everything else. And like, it's going to be the things that we realized 2 weeks later that didn't matter what we were talking about. Well, why were we talking about that? Actually, this first one does matter, but I think it's one that's unlikely to be talked about, but it might be. We've all kind of resigned ourselves to JC Latham is the dude. He's going to be perfectly fine on the left side of the line. That, for as much coming out of the draft, the detractor takes were JC Latham. You can't just up and move him to left tackle. And then T'Vondre Sweat, you can't just up and assume he's going to be healthy and stay, underweight and all these things. One of those things is still a rampant narrative out there, though. T'Vondre Sweat, he did not defeat the allegations in OTAs by any stretch of the imagination. JC Latham, he pretty much beat down those allegations with the way that he was carrying himself on and off the field. He was fantastic in drills, owning Bertha and Olga by the third day that he was working on them. All of the praise from his teammates and his offensive line coach and his head coach, and talking to him at the podium and cutting up with Brian Callahan, interrupting the press conference and asking him about, hey, can you get your left tackle a touchdown, Pat? But you want to give that away? Come on, JC. That all of that, very good times, feel good times. Can't help but write positive articles about that Everything is A-okay in JC Latham first round pick land for the Titans. And yet, he's still a rookie. He's playing a different position than he's not ever played. He played left tackle a lot in high school, but it's been a couple of years since he's done that. It's the NFL level. There's a learning curve even for guys that were the best left tackle in college football at the left tackle position. Like, even those guys come into the NFL and they struggle a little bit. So it would not be super shocking that JC Latham has a little bit of a learning curve. We all we realize, okay, we just tap the brake a little bit on JC Latham because there's going to be some struggles here, but not lose faith in the guy. But like, I think that train is thundering down the tracks at an alarming rate, and I wouldn't be shocked to see it kind of, reeled back just a little bit. But,
yeah, I think that's totally fair to say. I mean, the rookie factor continues to kind of come for every single rookie. Like that will happen at some point. And, I think the storyline this OTAs was the fact that there is confidence. There's no more intense doubt that this isn't going to work. I think there's a mellow amount of confidence that even if it takes half a season or a full season for JC Latham, him at left tackle, most likely, it's not the drastic change that a lot of people made it out to be. Okay. As far as the production, that's different, I think.
Okay, that one was less nerdy. These two are very nerdy, and I will just rattle them off real quick. A Mason Rudolph take. I heard from two different people, both national folks on prominent platforms, one on NBC of all places, in the spring, talking about, well, this is a big year for Will Levis, and Mason Rudolph's on that team. He has a significant track record of winning games despite being a backup quarterback. He showed a lot to us last year in that Pittsburgh system. He's going to be pushing a young player looking to solidify their position as a starting quarterback in the NFL. It would not shock me at all if by week 3, the Titans are considering Mason Rudolph as their starting quarterback going forward, because Will Levis struggles out of the gate. And all of this nonsense. And you like, okay, this guy doesn't know. Or actually, it was a girl. Doesn't know what they're talking about. Not paying attention to the Titans. We're going to ignore that. But if you going back to our first topic of the day, Will Levis, if it kind of struggles out of that first practice or two, Will Levis, what's going on? Why am I not focused? Come on, technical difficulties. There it is. Why is he not looking a lot better? Well, Mason Rudolph in practice kind of had the same day that Will Levis did. If any of those days happen, I think you're going to hear it again, and it's going to be super annoying, and it's going to suck, but I think that is going to happen. What do we think about that?
It's an interesting one, but, I think if they're like, I do have a lot of confidence in Mason Rudolph from what I saw last year. Too much.
That's what I'm saying. It's too much confidence.
I mean, I didn't say it was too much confidence. I think he could realistically run the offense in a Gardner Minshew style where it's cookie cutter enough for him that I think he has what he needs to succeed.
Right. That's okay. So then the last one, this one is just the grossest one. And if you've been a listener of this show for, a year now, going back to last offseason, you know that this is a guy that every year intoxicates me, and every year I get burned. Well, Thomas Odukoya, is my heart once again going to pine?
Is he going to come off the international player list? That is the main question. Will he ever make it to an actual active roster practice? Will he be on that active roster?
Will Steinhardt pine for Thomas O in my life on Sundays? Methinks yes. Methinks it will be the case, and my heart will be broken once again.
I have nothing else to say on that one. I got nothing else on that one.
That's the reason why I put it in the gross nerdy conversation. Yes. Before we get out of here, 2 comments from Kenneth and Derek, seemingly connected. Kenneth asking, I'm surprised offensive play calling hasn't been brought up. Why isn't Brian Callahan a storyline? A fair point. The reason why I don't think either of us thought to bring it up in this episode is because this is topics that we think, questions that can be answered in the training camp process. And you're not going to get play calling questions answered in the training camp process. That's going to be, if we do another one of these episodes between the end of training camp and the beginning of the season, that's going to be what we talk about is, okay, let's finally see this play calling. We've got a little glimpse of it in sessions of practices we can't talk about. And in the preseason game, it's all cookie cutter stuff. It's all, generic stuff they're rolling out there. High school football level schemes. We're not seeing the meat of it until these guys play a game that means something. That's when we're going to be talking about that. It is a storyline. It's just not one yet, in my opinion. And then Derek asking, everyone talks about Callahan's offense as if it's a known quantity. Could it end up looking surprisingly different than Cincy's offense? This is a thought that has crossed my mind. Based on everything we've heard, I think at this point, based on the things he's alluded to, it would be a surprise if it was a dramatically different offense than Cincinnati / just the generic, Shanahan McVay spread system. I think that'd be surprising if it was markedly different, because they've been talking a lot about that. But maybe. I mean, we've not seen it. Right? I would say the chance is very low, but it's not zero, is what I would say.
Yeah, I would agree there. It most likely, I mean, even Tyler Boyd kind of alludes to that's the reason, at least part of it, why he came here. It's like, to help install the system that he basically knows
when he's
already.
saying I already know this system, like the whole thing, then I'm assuming it's like the same system,
right? You know what I mean? And I think there is going to be some variation, like, with maybe in like the thing that I keep coming back to, and we talked about earlier, the increasing maybe of seeing even more two back or two tight end sets that Cincinnati never really ran a lot. Like that could be something that they do, but just kind of how they have the offense set up, it's kind of like you're playing, you have Tyler Boyd to play the Tyler Boyd role. You have Tony Pollard to play the Joe Mixon role. You have Tyjae Spears to play the Chase Brown, Samaje Perine role. You have Calvin Ridley to be the Jamar Chase light in the X. You have DeAndre Hopkins to be the T Higgins light in the Z. Like you have like all these things that line up and make sense on this offense. And so I think there is going to be some variation, but like when it comes to just the standard offense, like Brian Callahan and some players have pretty clearly said that it is going to be a lot of like what he called in Cincinnati.
Mm-hmm. All right, that's going to be it for us today on the offensive storylines. Appreciate everybody that tuned in with us live. We'll be back on Thursday. In terms of scheduling for the show, by the way, we're going to continue to do live shows Tuesday afternoon and Thursday afternoons, released on the podcast platform on Wednesday mornings, Friday mornings for the time being. But if you've listened to this show for long enough, we change based on the season, and eventually we'll probably be going back to 3 episodes a week. I'll tell you this, when we get to the season, it will definitely be that, because we do our Sunday evening live react episodes as well as a Tuesday afternoon, Thursday afternoon live shows. So, but I would keep an eye out. I would not be shocked if during this training camp portion of the year, when we get to preseason games, perhaps we start going back to 3 episodes a week. So keep an eye out for some scheduling changes. The best way to keep an eye on all of those things is to be following us on social media at Hot Read Pod on all platforms, on TikTok, on Twitter, on Instagram, especially on the Twitter, the X account. That's where you're going to find all of our programming updates. Whenever we know something's different, we will put it on there. Derek asking 5 p.m. Eastern. Yes, but it's sometime, but we go live unless otherwise stated, sometime between 5 p.m. and 5:30 Eastern time. So for those of us in the Central Time Zone, 4 and 4:30 on Tuesday and Thursday afternoons. Sometimes that's different based on the scheduling and training camp or whatever happens, breaking news, and you'll see those scheduling changes on at Hot Read Pod on X. But otherwise, that is the case, 4 to 4:30. Until 4 or 4:30 in the afternoon on Thursday. I'm your host, Easton Freeze, for producer JT. This has been the Hot Read Podcast. We'll be back with defensive talking points on Thursday. Talk to you then.